Talofa lava, I am Monty Betham. You are watching Once a Warrior. Today's guest came to the club as a grand final winner, but also a representative for both Australia and also the Queensland Maroons, the Māori Maroons, and at 25 years of age. In his peak, Brent Tate. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me, Monty. It's awesome to be here, mate.
Mate, we've heard your insightful commentary sideline over there, but what else is keeping you busy and where are you?
I'm still in Townsville. I end up staying up here after my time with the Cowboys. Still connected to the footy, obviously doing the Fox commentary, which is really cool. And I've got a full-time job up here in insurance. So, mate, it's been a bit of a journey, but still in Townsville, still enjoying the heat.
We saw you round 3 up there in Townsville. You were sidelined to see the Warriors play, the best seat in the house. Your thoughts on the new Warriors side you've seen this year?
Yeah, well, I'm still very much connected to the Cowboys, Monty, but I must admit I was really excited about the way the Warriors were playing. I just hope this team realises their potential because I think they've got some armour there that they can really do a bit of damage in this comp. And I think if they continue their trajectory, Monty, they should be playing finals this year. Let's hope.
Well, Tate, your career was one big highlight reel, and it was no different when you're in the Warriors jumper.
Still going. Brent Tate causing problems. Tate, Manor can't catch him. Neither can Nathan Hindmarsh. Here's Tate straight through. Great run, Brent Tate. Tate cuts back in field. Beats one. Says bye-bye, Peter Wallace. Brent Tate supplying the finish. That was brilliant.
Tate, when you watch those highlights back, what comes to mind, man?
I can't help but smile, Monty, at my time in New Zealand. I loved it, and I loved what the club was about. A lot of people ask me about, because I played at 3 different clubs. I played at Brisbane, the Cowboys and the Warriors, and I don't have a favourite club as such. Like I played at Brisbane, they're the most professional club I ever played at. But the Warriors, I loved the brothership. I loved the mateship that the Kiwi boys brought. I loved the people. I loved the humbleness of the club. I think my 3 years in New Zealand, moving away from Australia to New Zealand, really made me grow as a person, mate. And we had our first child in New Zealand. I always joke about this, Monty. He's got a Kiwi passport, which, sometimes I struggle with being a proud Aussie. But I do say the only thing that saves it is he wasn't born in New South Wales, so I'm pretty happy with that. Mate, I absolutely love my time and, it's with a massive smile on my face when I think back to those memories back in New Zealand.
One of the reasons why I really like the fact that you signed with the club is because of all the times that I faced you and the Māori Broncos in the early 2000s. So before we talk your time in the Warriors jumper, let's talk about those early clashes through the early 2000s because, man, they were hectic.
Oh, Monty, there was probably some of the only times where I've been intimidated playing rugby league, I think. I've never been scared's not the right word, but man, probably was a little bit sometimes, to be honest, because you were big men, you were aggressive, scary, and when you played the Warriors, mate, I just knew you had to be physical. I knew we were going to be in for it. And, going to Mount Smart and facing you guys with that crowd going berserk, mate, it was a really, really intimidating place to go. It was either Francis Melly who. Mate, there's a highlight reel as long as my arms with him smashing me. And it was really cool, actually, because I thought once, Francis Melly left, I thought, oh, beautiful. I don't have to put up with that when they bring in Manu Vatuvei. So, mate, it was just two big beasts after another. And honestly, I didn't enjoy you guys because it was always intimidating. But it did bring out the best in you because you knew if you didn't turn up physically, you're in strife.
Tate, I loved your signing. It's probably one of the signings that I really couldn't believe that was happening, especially in the peak of your powers coming down. I've seen you play many times, played against you, and I thought you were an absolute beast of a man. So don't spare any details. How did it even come about, even the first thought of coming over to the Warriors and then how it eventuated?
Yeah, well, I was playing at Brisbane at the time and I'd play left centre 1 week, right centre, right wing, left wing, and getting to that point in my career where I wanted to really apply my craft in one position. I was also really looking for a leadership role. I thought I was at 25. I was sort of getting to that point where I wanted to be a real leader in the team. And it was a little bit hard at Brisbane at the time because we still had the likes of Darren Lockyer and Sean Berry against Petro Sivanasiva, all these guys who were legends and still had a lot of footy left in front of them. So Sydney was never an option for me. I hated living in Sydney. I just did not want to be a part of that. And my brother-in-law Pricey was obviously in New Zealand, and we started having a bit of a chat around things, and it started to snowball. And Monty, to be honest, there was a couple of clubs interested at the time, and I honestly just remember closing my eyes and thinking to myself about playing in a jersey and what I could see myself playing in. And honestly, the only jersey I could imagine myself playing in was in New Zealand. So we signed a deal, went over there, and mate, probably had three of the greatest years of my life in New Zealand, because I honestly, Monty, I can't speak highly enough of the club, the people, and what it was about.
What about Pricey? I mean, he has been a constant in your life since probably very early on. Did he have much bearing on it? Like, did you go to him with the idea, or did he come to you with the idea?
He came to me with the idea. He was sort of saying, mate, we're looking for a player like yourself. And then it all started to snowball there. I tried really hard to separate Pricey and the family out of it, because I knew, if I did come over and they left or something happened with them and they had to leave, and I wanted to make sure that it was a decision that I was making. But looking back now, Monty, he was in my ear nearly every day talking to me about how great the club was, where they were heading, and just so thankful I listened to him. But he did have a huge bearing on me going over there in the end.
So you played with Pricey before coming into the Warriors, but you've never sort of played week in, week out with them in the club football situation. So how was it different?
Oh, I guess it wasn't too much different, mate. I always knew, what a professional Pricey was, how he prepared himself. He was one of those guys that worked really hard at his game and trained really hard. And it was actually really good for me to come over and watch a bit around Pricey's leadership and how he did things. And one of the great things about Pricey, I think, too, is he didn't sweat the small stuff. I was always such everything had to be right on and off the field for me to play well. And, Pricey taught me to relax away from the footy field, and if you wanted to eat that ice cream, it didn't matter, and it really didn't. But that's how rigid I was around my preparation. And I must admit, I really struggled at the start when I came from Brisbane, and I was at the Warriors. And, I remember talking to Pricey a couple of times. I sort of said to him, we do it like this at Brisbane, or we do it like that at Brisbane. And I remember one day Pricey must have just had enough of it. We're at training, and he actually grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and he shook me. He goes, mate, you're not at Brisbane now, you're at the Warriors, so get on board. And it really sort of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. And I thought, you know what, you're right, I am at the Warriors, and this is how we do it here. And who's to say, that was the right way to do it at Brisbane all the time. So once he sort of shook me and he stopped me in my tracks, mate, and I had a bit of a think about it, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get right on board with the Warrior way, and there's different ways to skin a cat.
Aussie, Kiwi, coaching staff, even just great supporters. Who made an impression on you early on in those early moments at the club?
Mate, I think John Hart really did. I really enjoyed speaking to John Hart. In some ways, mate, he reminded me a little bit like a Wayne Bennett sort of type of person. Every time I spoke to John, he was very professional. Everything he said made sense. Was really measured, and we talked a lot about me coming to the club and what I'd bring. I knew he had obviously that all black background, so I knew if he was involved in the club was going to be professional. It was going to be a great place to be. And you had, Ivan Cleary. I'll never ever forget when I first came to the Warriors. And it was one of my first couple of training sessions. We were there, and we were doing a few sets of six on the line, and we were under pressure defensively, and one of the boys decided to do a short drop out, and went out in the full, and it was a penalty. And it was only a training drill, but I remember sort of walking past Ivan going, mate, that was just a soft option, Ivan. Like, bloody hell. And Ivan sort of stopped me and grabbed me, and he pulled me back and he said, Tatey, that's what we brought you here for. I want you to find your voice. And then next thing I sort of said to the boys, hey, that's a soft option, boys. Let's just back out of fence. We've got this. Let's believe in ourselves, blah, 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 whatever I said at that stage. But, it was just Ivan grabbing me and just reminding me we brought you here to be a leader. find your voice, and I want you to find it now. So, mate, he was a really big influence on me going there as well, and really enjoyed my time under Ivan. He was a great coach and a really great fit for the Warriors at that time.
Tate, first game at Mount Smart in the Warriors colours. What do you remember?
I just remember running out to Mount Smart, and I've had some wonderful experiences, I guess. I've been lucky enough to sort of play all over the world with the Kangaroos in England and some wonderful stadiums. But Monty, 8,000 at Mount Smart is like 52,000 at Suncorp on Origin night. And for me to run out in front of that and hear that drum beating, it's one of my favourite grounds to play at, Monty. As I said, 8,000 there sounded like 52 at Suncorp. And, mate, what a great place to play footy. What great supporters. Honestly, just awesome supporters, mate.
Brisbane Broncos, round 22. Obviously the first time against your old club. You would have penciled that one in the calendar.
Yeah, I did. Absolutely. It was I love playing at the Bronx. I was a proud Bronco, won a comp there, and I always say to people, when you win a comp at a club, you leave a piece of your DNA there. So, really strong connections. Had a lot of good mates there still. It wasn't a game that I was looking forward to, Mons, because of I don't know. It wasn't. I knew it was coming up, and I knew where it was, penciled in the calendar. But it wasn't a game I was actually looking forward to because, one, I was playing against a club that I really loved, and I had great mates there. And two, I just knew it was going to be a battle because I knew we'd get up for it. I knew Brisbane would be up for it, and I knew what sort of game it was going to be. So, funny feelings, but I was certainly. Mate, once I got to the Warriors, I was bleeding Warriors. So, it was pretty easy for me to get up for it, I guess, in the end.
When I look at you now, you've got a bit of stubble growing there. But let's go back to the beards, the idea, the concept, execution. What was that all about? Fill us in, man.
I hated it, by the way, mate. I used to hate having a beard. Craig Walker, our trainer, I think he was one of the ice hockey teams. I've got a funny feeling, or baseball, when they wouldn't shave their beard until they lost. Anyway, Walks started throwing it around the playing group. Made the playing group sort of picked it up and ran with it. Some of us kicking and screaming, but as I said, we were such a tight-knit group. It was one in, all in. So once one started doing it, we all started getting in on the act, and it started to grow legs within the team because we started to string some wins. So I think we went like 6 or 8 weeks straight without loss. So there's some woolly blokes out there, but. Looking back now, it was great fun. It actually brought us together closer, funny enough. Like it actually, it's funny, little things like that can make such a difference, but it really did.
You did the impossible. You went over there and you beat a Melbourne Storm side from 8th position. Talk to me about that. What do you remember?
Oh, mate, that was such an awesome day. Far out. When you play Melbourne at Olympic Park, you just know you're in for it, let alone being a semi-final, 1v8. No one gave us a chance. The only people that gave us a chance was Ivan Cleary and the coaching staff and us players. And I think, mate, the longer the game went, the more we grew in confidence and the more we were like, hang on, we can win this. I'll never, ever forget, obviously, Whitty, when he scored that try and he had the ball and he put it down. Like, mate, I just remember screaming, just get it down. But again, when you talk about, being in a game and it being tough and knowing at some stage, those superstars or those guys that were just rugby league players like Jerome, Michael Witt was a hell of a player as well, and then Manu to ice it the way he did, mate. What a win! And just looking back, mate, 1v8 had never been done in the NRL under that system before, and for us to go and do it was, mate, we were the talk of the town at that stage because all of a sudden people were like, man, this is a serious footy team.
And you were the talk of the country too with the home semi-final against the Roosters. It was the blackout. What a night that was. The atmosphere was crazy.
Oh, I've got goosebumps, mate, even thinking about it. To know on the plane home, we were getting told that the tickets were like, you couldn't get them. It was sold out. They were trying to find extra tickets and standing room. And then obviously the concept around it being a blackout, mate, honestly, Mons, I got goosebumps now. We were never going to get beaten or lose that night just because of the whole country got behind us, and it was a hell of a feeling. And I'll never ever forget that hit up, mate. Rubes got it from the back fence and he was screaming as he was running the ball. It was almost like he had the whole country pushing him off the back fence into the defensive line. And I think I was the first one to see help pick him up after he'd been knocked out. And I just remembered looking at Ruben and seeing that in his eyes, mate. And I was like, holy, like we're on. Like we've got to get behind this bloke. And mate, we did. It was one of the best nights of rugby league I've ever been a part of, mate. It was amazing. And talk about being intimidated. When you look in the crowd and it was just black and it was just noise, mate. Like it was so thick, the atmosphere. You know, like moving it out of the way to sort of get onto the footy field. It was incredible. What a night.
That whole run was incredible, even to the final series, and unfortunately in the preliminary final, and that one was spectacular against a good Manly side. Is there any sort of ifs or buts do you think that could have changed things?
Mate, I've got a lot of thoughts around that Manly side that year, to be honest. They just blew us off the park, Monty. They were like a team playing in round one, and we were like a team that had played all year and we're in a prelim final. So, like, I remember coming off the field thinking that just wasn't normal to be that fit, that fast, that fresh coming into a prelim final. So, I don't think we could have done anything more, mate. Though I guess at the end of the day, they were just too good, too fit, too fast for us. We really were limping into the finals. We had guys playing with pain-killing injections and mate, we were up for it. Don't get me wrong. Like we were, there was a couple of times there in the game where I think Manu nearly scored and got the ball knocked out of his hand. Early on in the game, which I thought might have really, turned the table a little bit. But at the end of the day, I guess they were just too good for us, and they ended our run. But as I said, it was, looking back now, it was a pretty successful season, and when you get to a prelim final and you lose it, mate, you always look back and go, it is one that got away. But I do think back to that game and think there's not much we could have done better, or even, preparation or anything, mate. They were just too good.
You really did get what you wanted to build your leadership portfolio or your style, your techniques.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I always felt really welcomed, and I almost felt like a Kiwi when I was there, because we just won. I also wanted to be a leader by actions. I didn't want to, ask the team to do anything that I wasn't willing to do. So I quickly found out I had to, back up my actions pretty quickly. When you're saying something, you've got to be able to back that up. So I'll never ever forget this story. Just quickly, Monty, if I can. We went to a camp up at Takaha. Rusty he'd just been in the team. I don't even know if he'd played a game at that stage. Anyway, he was driving the car on the beach, bogged the car. He was just being an absolute peanut, mate. Like he was carrying on. And as a senior player, I'd found my voice. I was second year into the club, and I sat down and in front of everyone. I stood up and I started dressing, Rusty down. I said, "Rusty, you're acting like a peanut. Stop carrying on." And I remember Rusty stood up and he goes, "What are you going to do?" And I just looked at him and said nothing, and just sat back down and didn't say anything. I was too scared of him. So, but that was the sort of the kid he was. He just called you out straight away. He was a tough boy, mate.
You mentioned the brotherhood. Who are your go-tos on the field and off the field? Because I know as you do, the Aussie boys get a little bit closer too, because they get tight because they're sort of the family away from family, when they move overseas.
Yeah, mate. Well, we were a really close team, all of us. But I guess especially the Aussie boys, because like you say, you sort of become a family away from your own family in Australia. So, Michael Luck, Grant Ravelli lived just up the road. So, we used to spend a lot of time together, socialising. Luck, he'd come over and have a coffee every afternoon because he lived just up the road. And actually, some days, Lucky had let himself in the back door and start making the coffee, and I didn't even know he was there. I'd walk out, and he's got the coffee on. So Lucky had this wonderful ability to bring us all together. He was just one of those. He was a great team man, Lucky, and obviously everyone respected him because of the way he played. I always say to people, Lucky's one of the toughest players I ever played with, because Lucky'd put his head in places I wouldn't put my big toe on the footy field, and mate, he was just a hard nut. But he brought the team together, and he was a wonderful, wonderful club man.
Can we talk about Jerome Ropati? Because, I think he's a bit of an unsung hero, a wonderful player, and you being a centre yourself, having played against him, seeing what he can do. What made him special?
Mate, he just had X Factor Jerome. I think if he didn't have the injuries that he did, he could have been a real superstar. He was an out-and-out footballer, Jerome Ropati. When I think about footballers and natural talent, he had it more than anyone. And you look back at, some of the tries that Manu used to score, a lot of it was the lead-up work from Jerome. And, Mate, I used to be really jealous of Jerome and what he brought as a footballer because he could do things that I could only dream of. Like he had a great sleight of hand, he had footwork. You know, Jerome was tough. If I could nearly picture the perfect footballer, he comes to my mind because he just knew where to be on a footy field. He knew how to get a job done. And, mate, when you needed something special, Jerome was a man you go to.
Plenty of wingers played outside you. Who were your favourite wingers to play outside you at the club?
Without a doubt, mate, Manu Vardavai. If I had to pick a dream team, I'd pick him every day of the week, mate. Just the way he used to carry the ball to get the set started, and he'd score tries that no other winger in the comp could score. So I knew if we could get him in a position to even look like putting points on more often than not, he'd get it right. He was just such a wonderful, talented player. He is my dream team winger, Big Manu, and I played with the likes of Lottie DeKiri, played a few games at Wendell Sailor. These guys that were legends, but, mate, I had him before all those blokes.
Could you see where the club was building towards and how good they were going to go? And so why did you leave?
Yeah, I could definitely see the club going places, Monty, and I say this to everyone all the time. If I had been younger, I would never have left the club because I loved it, and it was probably it was a harder decision leaving the Warriors to go to the Cowboys than what it was for me leaving Brisbane to come to the Warriors. So it was a really, really hard decision, mate. I agonised over it for a long time because I knew I had unfinished business at the Warriors. I'd come to the club, I'd had a couple of injuries and probably didn't really play the footy I wanted to play. But I was really mindful, mate. I was one big injury away from having to retire. I only thought I was going to play another year or two. And I didn't want to retire in New Zealand, and then I knew I was always going to go home back to Australia and have nothing to go home to. So at the end of the day, mate, that was a big reason why I left is because I just didn't want to retire and have nothing to transition to, post-rugby league. So that was the only reason I left. I knew where the club was going, and I knew, Ivan coaching, and he was a wonderful coach. I knew he'd get the best out of him, and that's why it was such a tough and difficult decision. And looking back now, I wish I had stayed. I really do, but it wasn't to be. And they got to the grand final that year after, mate, and went within a whisker of winning it. So yeah, it was a really difficult decision for me in my career. Probably one of the hardest decisions I ever made in my career, Monty, to leave that club because I genuinely loved it, mate. When I said before, when I got there, I bled. Bled Warrior, and I used to genuinely love playing at Mount Smart, and whether there was 8,000 there or 30,000 there, it was an intimidating place to play. It was a great place to play if you're a New Zealand Warrior, and to represent New Zealand in that jersey was pretty bloody special.
Teddy, once a Warrior, always a Warrior, and I knew you were an absolute fierce Warrior before you even came to the club, bro, so thank you for your time in the jumper.
Oh, thank you, mate. I loved every minute.
I'm Monty Beetham. Thanks for watching Once a Warrior. I will see you next week.
And Tate, now he presses the go button and still going. Tate, the captain, he's in. Tate scores. And Tate comes away with it, and look at him go. Tate still going. Brent Tate causing problems. Tate, Manor can't catch him. Neither can Nathan Hindmarsh. Here's Tate, straight through. Great run, Brent Tate. Tate cuts back in field. Beats one, says bye-bye, Peter Wallace. Brent Tate